Imagine walking into a place you built with your own blood, sweat, and dreams, only to realize that everything you thought you knew about it was a lie. Michael Carter adjusted the worn baseball cap over his brow, the brim casting a shadow over his eyes as he pushed open the door to Carter's Diner. The familiar jingle of the bell above the entrance rang out, a sound that once filled him with pride. But today, no one looked up. Not a single employee noticed the man who had turned this struggling, greasy spoon into a local legend with 4 thriving locations across the city. Perfect. His disguise faded jeans, an old flannel shirt, and 3 days' worth of stubble worked like a charm. For the first time in years, Michael wasn't the boss. He was just another customer, slipping into the shadows of his own empire to uncover a truth that had been gnawing at him for months. Something was wrong at Carter's Diner, and today he was going to find out what. For 15 years, Michael Carter had poured his heart into this diner chain. What started as a rundown eatery on the edge of town had become a beloved institution, a place where families gathered and lonely souls found a warm meal and a kind word. But success had come at a cost. As the business grew, Michael found himself buried under expansion plans, investor meetings, and endless paperwork. He hadn't stepped foot in this flagship location in over a year, trusting his managers to keep the ship afloat. The customer reviews were still stellar, glowing with praise for the homey atmosphere and hearty food. Yet something didn't add up. Employee turnover had spiked in recent months, and profits at this location, once the heart of his operation, had dipped mysteriously, despite steady foot traffic. Late at night, when the city was quiet, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he had lost touch with the very thing he'd built. So he decided to go undercover, to see his business through the eyes of a stranger. What he didn't expect was that this simple act would unravel a web of deceit, heartbreak, and unexpected heroism. "Table for one," a waitress mumbled without looking up from her notepad, her tone flat, as if she'd asked the question 1,000 times that day. "Counter's fine," Michael replied, roughening his voice to match his scruffy appearance. He slid onto a stool at the far end of the counter, positioning himself where he could observe the entire operation unnoticed. The lunch rush was in full swing. Waitresses darted between tables with trays of steaming plates. Line cooks barked orders over the sizzle of griddles, and the cash register chimed with a steady rhythm. On the surface, everything looked normal, a well-oiled machine. But Michael's gut told him otherwise. There was a tension in the air, a subtle undercurrent he couldn't quite place. His eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. The chipped paint on the walls he hadn't noticed before, the hurried steps of overworked staff, and the forced smiles of customers waiting too long for their orders. That's when he saw him. Amid the chaos, an elderly man stood at the dishwashing station near the back, moving with a deliberate calm that contrasted sharply with the frantic pace around him. His name tag read Henry, and he looked to be in his mid-70s, rail thin with a shock of white hair peeking out from under a faded cap. His gnarled hands worked with surprising precision, stacking plates methodically as if each one were a piece of fine china. While others rushed and stumbled, Henry remained steady, his sharp eyes scanning the room beneath bushy eyebrows. Michael couldn't help but watch him, intrigued by the quiet dignity in his movements. There was something about Henry that felt familiar, like a memory of the kind of person Michael had always wanted his diner to represent. "What can I get you?" A young cashier with a name tag reading Megan finally acknowledged Michael, her tone more annoyed than welcoming. "Turkey club and coffee," Michael said, sliding a 20 across the counter. As Megan rang up his order with a bored expression, Michael nodded toward Henry. "He been here long?" Megan rolled her eyes, not even bothering to lower her voice. "Forever. Should have retired years ago, if you ask me. Probably can't afford to." She smirked, turning back to the register as if she'd just told a clever joke. Michael's grip tightened on the edge of the counter, but he kept his face neutral, sipping his coffee to hide the flicker of anger in his eyes. He had built Carter's Diner on the principle of respect for customers and employees alike. Hearing such casual disdain from one of his own staff cut deeper than he expected. Over the next hour, he watched Henry through the rim of his coffee cup. The old man never stopped moving, never complained, even when a busboy carelessly dumped a tray of dishes into his station, splashing dirty water onto his already soaked apron. Michael noticed how regular customers greeted Henry by name as they passed the dish window, how he always had a kind word or a warm smile in return. It was clear that Henry wasn't just a dishwasher to them, he was part of their community. Just before the end of the lunch rush, Michael witnessed something that made his heart skip a beat. A young woman with 2 small children approached the register after finishing their meal. Her face fell as she rummaged through her wallet, whispering something to Megan with visible embarrassment. Megan's expression soured instantly, and she called over another cashier, a young man whose name tag read Troy. Their hushed conversation carried tones of irritation as the young mother's distress grew, her children clinging to her legs, sensing her unease. From his station, Henry glanced over, his sharp eyes taking in the situation. Without hesitation, he dried his hands on his apron and shuffled to the register. Michael couldn't hear the exchange, but he saw Henry discreetly slip a few crumpled bills from his pocket to Megan. The mother's relief was palpable as she gathered her children and left, mouthing a heartfelt thank you to Henry over and over. "That's the 3rd time this week," Troy muttered to Megan, loud enough for Michael to overhear. "Old fool's gonna go broke saving strays." Megan snickered, her voice dripping with contempt. "As if he isn't broke already. Bet he sleeps in that junker car of his." Michael's hands clenched around his coffee cup, the ceramic nearly cracking under the pressure. He had come here looking for business insights, for numbers and strategies to fix a failing bottom line. Instead, he had stumbled upon something far more profound and far more disturbing. Who was this Henry, a man who gave so much despite having so little? And why were his own employees so quick to mock and dismiss him? As Michael studied Henry's weathered profile against the harsh fluorescent lights of the kitchen, he made a silent vow. He would uncover the full truth about what was happening in his diner, no matter how painful that truth might be. What would you do if you discovered that the heart of your business, the people who made it what it is, was being torn apart by greed and cruelty? Michael Carter sat in the dim light of Carter's Diner the following day, his worn baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, a cold cup of coffee in his hands. He had come back to this place, the flagship of his diner chain, hoping to uncover why profits were slipping and employees were leaving. But what he found yesterday wasn't a balance sheet problem, it was a human one. Henry, the elderly dishwasher with a quiet dignity, had captured his attention with small acts of kindness that stood in stark contrast to the callous words of 2 cashiers, Megan and Troy. Today, Michael was determined to dig deeper. What he didn't expect was that the truth would be darker and more personal than he could have ever imagined. Michael chose a booth near the counter this time, a spot where he could blend into the background during the mid-afternoon lull. His disguise-faded jeans and a flannel shirt still held, allowing him to observe without drawing attention. Henry was already at his station, moving a little slower than the day before, his weathered hands scrubbing dishes with the same meticulous care. Michael noticed the subtle winces Henry tried to hide, the way he rubbed his wrist or lower back when he thought no one was watching. Despite the evident pain, the old man never stopped, never complained. He even stayed past what should have been the end of his shift, cleaning corners of the kitchen others had neglected, wiping down surfaces with a rag that looked as worn as he was. As the hours passed, Michael saw more of Henry's quiet generosity. A teenager approached the register, his card declined for a simple burger and fries. The boy's face flushed with embarrassment as Megan smirked, her tone dripping with impatience. Before the situation could escalate, Henry shuffled over, slipping a few crumpled bills to cover the cost. Later, an elderly man, confused about the prices on the menu, came up short. Again, it was Henry who stepped in, discreetly making up the difference. Each time, customers thanked him with a gratitude that seemed to light up their faces, and each time, Henry simply nodded with a kind smile, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to give when you had so little. Megan and Troy were on shift again, their heads bent together at the register whenever business slowed. Michael ordered another coffee and a slice of pie, using a newspaper as cover while he strained to listen to their conversation. The diner was nearly empty, save for a few regulars nursing their drinks and a businessman typing away on his laptop. Troy leaned against the counter near Megan, speaking in a low voice that still carried to Michael's booth. "So, I checked the records," Troy said with a smirk. "Old man Henry's been here for 7 years. 7 years washing dishes. Pathetic, right?" Megan snorted, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "What's pathetic is how he keeps covering for these deadbeats who can't pay their bills. Like that single mom yesterday. Come on, playing the hero with what? His Social Security pennies?" Troy laughed, a harsh sound that made Michael's knuckles whiten around his coffee cup. "Guy probably lives off cat food to save money. I bet he sleeps in that rusty Buick he drives." "Nah, my money's on a cardboard box behind Walmart," Megan added, lowering her voice further. "Either way, he's becoming a problem." Patricia's starting to notice the register discrepancies. Their voices dropped even lower, and Michael had to lean in slightly to catch the rest. "So here's what I'm thinking," Troy said, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "We know Henry's been slipping money into the register when customers come up short, but Patricia doesn't know that. All she sees is the numbers don't add up." Megan's eyes lit up with understanding. "So if we just help those numbers not add up a little more." "Exactly," Troy nodded, a sly grin spreading across his face. "And then make sure she catches him near the register at the wrong time. She'll think he's been stealing." Megan finished the thought, barely containing her excitement. "And he's out. Done. No more sad old man dragging down the vibe." Michael felt a cold weight settle in his chest. They weren't just mocking an elderly man who had shown nothing but kindness. They were actively plotting to frame him, to ruin his life for their own petty gain. But why? He wanted to stand up, to shout, to tear off his disguise and fire them on the spot. Instead, he turned a page of his newspaper, forcing himself to listen for their motive. "Because," Troy explained, his voice dripping with arrogance, "I've got a cousin who needs a job. Young guy, twice as fast as Grandpa over there. If Henry's gone, I can bring him in, and we split the referral bonus. Plus," Megan added, her tone venomous, "I'm sick of watching him shuffle around like some charity case. It's depressing, and the way customers fawn all over him." "Oh, Henry, you're so kind. Oh, Henry, you're such a saint. Makes me want to puke." "Tomorrow," Troy decided, his voice firm. "Patricia's doing inventory, so she'll be extra focused on the numbers. We'll make sure they don't add up and make sure Henry's the only explanation." The pair sealed their plan with a fist bump before separating as a family entered the diner. Michael sat frozen, his coffee growing cold before him. Fury and disappointment warred in his chest. He had built this business with a vision of creating a place that felt like home for both customers and employees. Hearing such cruelty from his own staff made his stomach turn. But more than that, he felt a pang of guilt. How had he allowed things to deteriorate so badly under his watch? As closing time approached, Michael paid his bill and left. But he didn't go far. Parked across the street in his sedan, he waited, his mind racing with what he'd overheard. When Henry finally emerged, almost an hour after his shift should have ended, Michael followed at a discreet distance. Henry's ancient Buick coughed to life, the engine sputtering as he drove slowly through town, past the cozy residential neighborhoods and toward the outskirts. Instead of continuing on a main road, Henry turned onto a dirt access path behind a row of commercial properties nearly hidden from view. Michael followed, keeping his headlights off as he navigated the rugged terrain. The Buick stopped behind a cluster of trees that partially obscured the back lot of Carter's Diner. There, almost invisible from the main road, sat a small, dilapidated trailer that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Henry parked and made his way up 3 wooden steps that seemed ready to collapse under his weight. The door stuck, requiring him to shove it open with his shoulder. A single flickering light bulb illuminated the tiny space inside, revealing a home so small Michael could barely fathom how anyone lived there. Sitting in the darkness of his car, Michael felt shame wash over him. How had he never known? How had he failed to ensure that his employees, people who had dedicated years to his business, could afford decent housing? He had prided himself on creating a family at Carter's Diner, but he had been blind to the struggles of someone right under his nose. Have you ever felt the weight of betrayal so heavy that it forces you to question everything you've built? Michael Carter sat in his car under the cover of darkness, staring at the flickering light of Henry's dilapidated trailer behind Carter's Diner. The image of the elderly dishwasher, stooped with age, yet carrying a quiet dignity, haunted him. Just hours ago, Michael had overheard a chilling plot by 2 of his cashiers, Megan and Troy, to frame Henry for theft, all to replace him with a relative and rid themselves of what they saw as a pathetic burden. As the founder of this diner chain, Michael had prided himself on creating a family-like atmosphere. But now he realized he had failed Henry, a man who embodied the very values he claimed to uphold. Sleep eluded Michael that night, but by dawn, one thing was clear. He would not let Henry fall victim to this cruel scheme. Today, justice would begin to take shape. Back at his upscale home across town, Michael paced the polished floors of his study, the contrast between his own comfort and Henry's stark reality gnawing at him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Henry climbing those rickety steps to a trailer barely bigger than a storage shed. The shame was suffocating. How had he let things slip so far? He had built Carter's Diner on a promise of respect and care, yet here was one of his longest-serving employees living in near poverty, working through pain and still giving what little he had to help others. And worse, his own staff people he had trusted to carry out his vision were plotting to destroy Henry for their own selfish gain. Michael's anger burned hot, but it was matched by a growing determination. He had the power to make this right, and he would. By morning, he had made several phone calls, setting multiple plans in motion. This wasn't just about exposing Megan and Troy. It was about rebuilding the soul of Carter's Diner, starting with protecting Henry. Before returning to the diner, Michael drove to a nearby coffee shop where he'd arranged to meet Ron, a regular customer who had spoken kindly about Henry the day before. Still maintaining his disguise of worn clothes and a low-pulled cap, Michael slid into the booth across from Ron, who stirred his coffee slowly, his weathered face etched with concern. "Thanks for meeting me," Michael said, keeping his voice rough to match his appearance. "I can't stop thinking about Henry's situation. What's his story?" Ron sighed, his eyes distant. "Known Henry for almost 6 years now. Started coming to the diner right after his wife, Martha, passed. High school sweethearts, married over 50 years. Cancer took her, aggressive, needed experimental treatments their insurance wouldn't cover. Henry didn't think twice. Sold their house, cashed in his retirement, even sold their car to get her into the best facility. Gave them 8 more months together." Ron's voice roughened with emotion. "Henry says those were the most precious months of his life, even though they were the hardest." Michael swallowed hard, each word hitting like a punch. "Did it leave him with nothing?" "Less than nothing," Ron replied. "After she passed, the bills kept coming. Henry refused to declare bankruptcy, said a debt was a debt and he'd pay every penny. Took the dishwashing job at Carter's because no one else would hire a 70-year-old with arthritis and no experience in food service. Works harder than men half his age." "And the trailer?" Michael asked quietly. "Best he could afford while still making monthly payments to the hospital. Sends a little to his daughter in Seattle, too, though she doesn't know how bad it is. Henry makes sure of that, sends her pictures taken inside the diner, tells her business is good. She thinks he's a manager there." Ron shook his head. "Proud man, too proud if you ask me." Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. "Does she want to help him?" "Oh, she's begged him to move in with her," Ron said. "But he won't. Says he won't be a burden. The people at the diner, they're his family now, and helping those customers who can't pay. It gives him purpose, even when he's got so little himself." After thanking Ron, Michael sat in his car for a long moment, the weight of Henry's story pressing down on him. He had failed as a leader, as a human being, but he could still make this right. He would make this right. Michael arrived at Carter's diner just as the morning rush hit its peak, slipping into the same booth as the day before. His attention was fixed on Henry, who worked steadily at the dish station, occasionally emerging to bus tables when the rush became overwhelming. Despite what must have been constant pain, his only concession to age was a slightly slower pace than the younger staff. Megan and Troy, meanwhile, were already putting their plan into motion. Michael watched as Troy deliberately miscounted change for several customers, pocketing small amounts each time. Megan accidentally voided legitimate transactions, creating discrepancies in the register totals. Each time they exchanged knowing looks, occasionally glancing toward Henry, with smirks that made Michael's blood boil. Around 11 a.m., a young mother with 3 small children came in, the same woman Henry had helped days ago. As she approached the register to pay, Michael noticed her counting out change carefully, coming up short once again. Her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said quietly to Megan. "I thought I had enough. Can I leave the tip to cover the difference?" Megan's smile was saccharine, her tone cutting. "Oh, that's not necessary. I'm sure our dishwasher will cover it." Again. "Henry!" she called out loudly, drawing unwanted attention. "Customer needs your charity fund." The restaurant grew uncomfortably quiet. The young mother's face burned with humiliation as her children looked up in confusion. Henry emerged from the kitchen, quickly assessing the situation. Without hesitation or a word about Megan's cruelty, he reached into his pocket and handed the woman enough to cover her shortfall. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes downcast. "I promise I'll pay you back next week when my check comes." "No rush, Amy," Henry said kindly. "The kids enjoying their summer break?" Just like that, he transformed an awkward moment into a friendly exchange, asking about her children's activities and congratulating her on a recent job interview. By the time Amy left, her dignity was restored. As Henry returned to his station, Michael overheard Troy mutter to Megan, "Perfect. That's another $15 to add to our total. Patricia's gonna flip when she sees how much is missing." Michael had seen enough. He slipped outside and made a phone call, setting the final piece of his plan in place. He wasn't just going to catch Megan and Troy in the act, he was going to turn their scheme against them in a way they'd never see coming. Back in his car, Michael dialed a trusted contact from his corporate office. "I need hidden cameras installed at the diner tonight after closing," he said, his voice firm. "Audio capability, full coverage of the registers and dish station. No one can know, not even the managers. And I want the footage streamed directly to my device." Next, he contacted a local community outreach program he'd supported in the past. "I need someone willing to help with a small undercover operation tomorrow," he explained. "A single parent, someone struggling but genuine. I'll compensate them generously for their time." Finally, he called his legal team. "Prepare documentation for immediate termination and potential charges for theft and fraud. I'll have video evidence by tomorrow evening, and start drafting a new policy for employee welfare, living wages, emergency funds, the works. No one in my company will ever live like Henry does again." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Michael felt a steely resolve settle over him. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about exposing Troy and Megan's scheme. It would be about fundamentally changing how his business operated, starting with making sure employees like Henry never had to suffer in silence again. What happens when the mask of kindness slips, revealing the ugliest truths beneath? Michael Carter arrived at Carter's diner early the next morning, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and cold fury. For 3 days he had watched from the shadows, disguised as just another customer, as two of his cashiers, Megan and Troy, plotted to frame an innocent elderly dishwasher named Henry for theft. He had seen Henry's quiet acts of generosity, learned of his heartbreaking past, and witnessed the stark reality of his life in a dilapidated trailer. Last night, Michael had set the wheels of justice in motion. Hidden cameras with the audio capability were installed, a trap was laid, and the police were on standby. Today was the day of reckoning at Carter's diner. But would his plan be enough to save Henry and expose the betrayal festering in the heart of his business? Dressed in the same unassuming clothes, faded jeans, a flannel shirt, and a worn baseball cap, Michael settled into his usual booth with a clear view of both the registers and the dish room. The morning proceeded normally at first. Henry arrived punctually, as always, moving a little stiffer than the day before, his weathered hands already at work, scrubbing dishes. Troy and Megan came in together, whispering and sharing conspiratorial smiles, their confidence bordering on arrogance. Patricia, the manager on duty, paced between the kitchen and her office, her brow furrowed with stress over the missing money Michael knew had been orchestrated by the scheming cashiers. Everything was in place. Michael's hidden cameras were rolling, capturing every move, every word. He clutched a small device in his pocket, connected to the live feed, ready to pull up the evidence when the moment came. At precisely 10:15 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. A young woman in her early 30s entered, holding the hand of a small girl about 5 years old. They were dressed simply but neatly, with subtle signs of financial strains, slightly worn shoes, a coat with a carefully mended sleeve. This was Jessica Miller, a struggling single mother Michael had contacted through a local community outreach program. She wasn't acting. She truly was raising her daughter alone while working 2 jobs. But she had agreed to help Michael today, in exchange for a generous donation to her daughter's education fund. Jessica and her daughter, Lily, took a seat at a booth near the counter. Megan approached to take their order, her customer service smile firmly in place. "Just a grilled cheese for my daughter, and a cup of soup for me, please," Jessica said, her voice soft. When Jessica went to pay 20 minutes later, she opened her wallet, and her face fell in apparently genuine distress. "I'm so sorry," she said to Megan, her voice low. "I thought I had enough cash. My card was declined yesterday, bank issue. They're still fixing it. I'm $15 short." Megan's smile turned cold, her tone sharp. "We can't just give away food, ma'am. Maybe you should count your money before ordering next time." Jessica's eyes welled with tears as her daughter looked up in confusion. "Could I maybe wash dishes to make up the difference? I really don't have anywhere else to go." "We have staff for that," Megan replied curtly. From his position at the dish window, Henry had been watching. Right on cue, he dried his hands and approached the register. "I've got it, Megan," he said quietly, reaching for his wallet. "That's really not necessary," Jessica protested, playing her part perfectly. Henry smiled kindly. "We all need help sometimes. You can pay it forward when things get better." As Henry handed over the money to cover Jessica's shortfall, Michael saw Troy watching from the second register, a satisfied smirk on his face. The trap was being set exactly as Michael had anticipated. Jessica thanked Henry profusely, then left with her daughter, her role complete. Less than 10 minutes later, Troy approached Patricia, who was reviewing receipts at the counter. Boss," Troy said, his voice carrying just enough to draw attention. "You might want to check register 1 again. I think we're short another $20 from the last count." Patricia's expression darkened. "That's impossible. I just balanced it an hour ago." Megan joined them, her face a mask of concern. "Actually, I noticed something weird earlier when that woman couldn't pay her full bill. Henry came over right after, and I saw him near the drawer while I was helping another customer." "Are you suggesting Henry is stealing?" Patricia asked, echoing the previous day's conversation but with more worry in her voice. Troy shrugged with calculated casualness. "I'm just saying maybe check the cameras." "Oh, wait, they're broken." "Convenient, huh?" "This is serious," Patricia said, clearly distressed. "If someone's stealing, I need to know right now." The owner's been asking questions about the numbers not adding up. "Maybe do a surprise cash count." Megan nodded eagerly. "Right now, before anyone has a chance to adjust anything." Patricia nodded grimly and began counting the drawer with Troy and Megan hovering nearby. Michael could see from their expressions the moment Patricia discovered the shortage they had engineered. $37 missing, Patricia announced, her face pale. "That's over $100 this week alone. I have to take action." Michael watched as she straightened her shoulders and marched toward the dish room where Henry was working, unaware of what was about to happen. Troy and Megan followed, barely concealing their triumphant expressions. "Henry," Patricia called, her voice strained. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" The elderly man looked up, confusion crossing his face as he noticed the serious expressions of the three staff members. "Of course, Patricia. Is something wrong?" "I need to ask you directly," Patricia said, her tone heavy. "The register has been coming up short all week. Today alone, we're missing nearly $40, and it happened right after you were seen near the cash drawer." Henry's face registered shock, followed by deep hurt. "You think I'm stealing? We've seen you at the register multiple times when you have no reason to be there," Troy added, his voice dripping with false regret. "And the money always goes missing right after." "I was helping customers who couldn't pay their full bills," Henry explained, looking bewildered. "I was putting money in, not taking it out." Megan scoffed. "On a dishwasher's salary? How convenient." Henry's weathered hands trembled slightly as the implications became clear. "I would never steal. Not from anyone, and certainly not from this diner. This place has been my lifeline these past years." Patricia looked torn. "Henry, I've always trusted you, but the numbers don't lie." "And with multiple witnesses saying they've seen you accessing the register inappropriately, multiple witnesses?" Henry looked around in confusion. "Megan and Troy both reported seeing you," Patricia explained. Understanding dawned on Henry's face, followed by a profound sadness that made Michael's chest tighten. The old man didn't defend himself further, didn't accuse his co-workers of lying. He simply stood there, dignity intact despite the humiliation being heaped upon him. "I see," Henry said quietly. "I suppose you'll be wanting my resignation." "I'm afraid I have to let you go immediately," Patricia said, genuine regret in her voice. "Company policy for theft is clear." A hush had fallen over the diner. Customers and staff alike had stopped to watch the confrontation, many with expressions of disbelief that Henry could be accused of such a thing. Troy stepped forward. "I'll escort him to get his things," he offered, barely hiding his satisfaction. "That won't be necessary," came a new voice, cutting through the tense silence like a blade. Michael stood up from his booth, no longer slouching or affecting a rougher manner of speaking. He straightened to his full height, removed the baseball cap, and walked toward the group with the confident stride of someone used to being in charge. Patricia's eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Carter? I had no idea you were clearly—" Michael interrupted, his voice carrying throughout the now silent diner. "There seems to be a situation here that requires the owner's immediate attention." The silence in Carter's diner was absolute. Silverware froze mid-air, conversations halted mid-sentence, and even the kitchen's usual clamor fell quiet. Every eye followed the diner's owner as he approached the group around Henry. Michael's gaze was cold, unflinching, as it settled on Troy and Megan. "For those who don't recognize me," Michael announced, addressing the entire diner, "I'm Michael Carter. I founded this chain 15 years ago with a simple vision: treat customers like family and employees with respect. Somewhere along the way, that vision was compromised. But I've been here every day this week, observing my business from a customer's perspective, and what I've witnessed has been illuminating." Troy forced a nervous laugh. "Sir, we were just following protocol for theft incidents, as I was telling Patricia." "Enough," Michael said, his quiet tone somehow more commanding than a shout. Troy's mouth snapped shut instantly. Henry stood bewildered by his dishwashing station, dripping hands still clutching a dish towel, eyes moving between Michael and the others as he tried to process this unexpected development. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and removed the small device connected to the hidden cameras. Patricia mentioned broken security cameras. Interesting, since I personally authorized new ones 2 days ago. Hidden ones, with audio capability. Patricia's eyes widened in shock. But I never received notification about aware, Michael interrupted. There are several communication breakdowns well addressed later. For now, I'd like everyone to see exactly what's been happening in my diner. With practiced ease, Michael connected the device to the television mounted in the corner. The screen flickered to life, showing crystal clear footage from the past few days. There was Troy, pocketing small bills from the register while overcharging customers. Next came Megan, voiding legitimate transactions after customers left. Then, both of them huddled at the counter's end, plotting in what they thought were whispers, but came through the enhanced audio with perfect clarity. If we frame Henry for stealing, Patricia will have to fire him, Troy's voice echoed through the diner. Then I can bring in my cousin. We split the referral bonus and no more pathetic old man bringing everyone down. Gasps rippled through the diner. Several regular customers stood up, their faces contorted with anger. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth in horror. Michael's expression remained stone cold as he advanced the footage, but inside his heart raced with both fury and vindication. What does it take to rebuild trust once it's been shattered by betrayal? The air in Carter's diner was thick with tension as the television screen flickered with damning footage, exposing the cruel scheme of two cashiers, Megan and Troy, to frame an innocent elderly dishwasher named Henry for theft. Michael Carter, the founder of the diner chain, stood in the center of his flagship location, no longer disguised as a humble customer, but revealed as the rightful owner. For days he had watched from the shadows, witnessing Henry's quiet kindness and the stark injustice brewing under his own roof. Now, with hidden cameras revealing every deceitful act and word, the truth was undeniable. But exposing the guilty was only the first step. Could Michael restore the soul of his business and ensure that no employee would ever suffer in silence again? Stay with us for the emotional conclusion of this powerful story. As the footage looped on the screen showing Troy pocketing cash and Megan voiding transactions while plotting to frame Henry, the diner remained in stunned silence. Regular customers who had known Henry for years glared at the two cashiers with undisguised anger. Patricia, the manager on duty, looked ashen, her hands trembling as she realized how close she had come to firing an innocent man based on lies. Megan and Troy stood frozen near the register, their earlier smugness replaced by sheer panic. Troy opened his mouth to protest, but Michael raised a hand, silencing him before a word could escape. "Let me be clear," Michael said, his voice low but carrying the weight of authority. "What I've seen this week disgusts me. Not just the theft, not just the lies, but the deliberate cruelty you've shown to a man who has given everything to this diner and its community. Henry has been here for 7 years, working through pain, living in conditions none of us could imagine, and still finding ways to help others. And you thought you could destroy him for a referral bonus and a cheap laugh." Megan stammered, her face flushed. "Sir, we didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just a stupid idea. We weren't really—" "Enough," Michael cut her off, his tone icy. "Your words are on that recording, planning every step. You mocked a man's poverty, his kindness, and his dignity. You stole from my business and tried to pin it on someone else. There is no excuse for that." Troy squared his shoulders, attempting defiance. "You can't prove we took anything. That footage doesn't show—" "It shows enough," Michael interrupted, pulling a folder from his jacket. "And I've had my accounting team audit every transaction at this location for the past 3 months. The discrepancies match your shifts perfectly. Combined with this evidence, it's more than sufficient for legal action. But I'm giving you one chance to walk away without charges. Resign now, return every cent you've stolen, and never set foot in any Carter's diner again. Refuse, and I'll hand this over to the authorities waiting outside." The mention of police made Troy's bravado crumble. Megan's eyes darted to the door where two uniformed officers were indeed visible through the glass, having arrived discreetly at Michael's earlier request. Within minutes, both cashiers had signed resignation letters prepared by Michael's legal team, their hands shaking as they scribbled their names. They left under the watchful eyes of the officers, heads bowed, the weight of their actions finally sinking in. The diner erupted in murmurs as the door closed behind them, a mix of relief and lingering anger rippling through the crowd. With Megan and Troy gone, Michael turned to Henry, who had remained silent near his dishwashing station throughout the confrontation. The elderly man's face was a mask of quiet dignity, though his eyes shone with unshed tears. Michael walked over, extending a hand not as a boss, but as a man humbled by what he had witnessed. "Henry," Michael began, his voice softer now, "I owe you an apology. I built this diner on the idea of family, of respect, and I failed you. I didn't know about your struggles, your home, your health, the sacrifices you've made. I should have known. I should have been here, not buried in boardrooms while my people suffered. I'm sorry." Henry shook his head slowly, gripping Michael's hand with surprising strength. "Mr. Carter, you gave me a job when no one else would. This place, these people, they've been my family since I lost mine. I don't blame you for not knowing. I didn't want anyone to know." "That changes today," Michael said firmly. "You've shown more heart in a single shift than most people do in a lifetime. I saw you cover meals for customers who couldn't pay, even when it meant going without yourself. I heard your story from others, show you sold everything to care for your wife, how you've kept working through pain to pay off debts and support your daughter. You're not just an employee, Henry. You're the soul of what this diner should be." To the surprise of everyone watching, Michael reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out an envelope. "Effective immediately, I'm promoting you to Community Ambassador for Carter's Diner. Your role will be to connect with customers, to share your kindness in a way that doesn't involve scrubbing dishes for 12 hours a day. Your salary will be tripled with full benefits, including housing assistance. And this," he said, handing over the envelope, "is a bonus to clear the last of your medical debts and ensure you can live comfortably while we find you a proper home near your daughter in Seattle, if that's what you choose." Henry opened the envelope with trembling hands, his eyes widening at the check inside. For the first time, his stoic composure broke, a single tear rolling down his weathered cheek. I don't know what to say, sir. This is more than I ever dreamed." "You don't have to say anything," Michael replied. "Just keep being you. That's more than enough." The diner burst into applause, customers and staff alike clapping and cheering for Henry, many wiping away tears of their own. Regulars who had benefited from his quiet generosity over the years called out their thanks, their voices overlapping in a chorus of gratitude. Henry, overwhelmed, could only nod, a shy smile breaking through as he clutched the envelope like a lifeline. But Michael wasn't done. Turning to address the entire diner, he raised his voice to be heard over the lingering applause. "What happened here this week is a wake-up call for me. I've been absent too long, focused on expansion while losing sight of the people who make this business what it is. That stops now. Effective immediately, I'm implementing new policies across all Carter's Diner locations. First, a living wage for every employee with regular reviews to ensure no one struggles to afford basic necessities. Second, an emergency fund for staff facing unexpected hardships, medical bills, housing crises, anything. Third, mandatory training on respect and teamwork because no one should ever feel mocked or disposable in my company. And finally, I'm creating a position at the corporate level to oversee employee welfare, reporting directly to me. No one will slip through the cracks again." Patricia, still reeling from the day's events, stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, I want to apologize as well. I should have noticed the discrepancies sooner, should have questioned Megan and Troy's accusations more thoroughly. I failed Henry too. Michael nodded, his expression softening. We all did, Patricia, but you acted based on the information you had, and I trust you to help me rebuild this location into what it should be. Let's start fresh, together. He then turned to the customers, many of whom had stayed through the entire ordeal, drawn by the drama and the promise of resolution. To all of you, thank you for your loyalty to Carter's Diner. I know we've fallen short of the experience you deserve, but I promise to make it right. For the rest of the day, all meals are on the house as a token of my gratitude and my commitment to earning back your trust. Cheers erupted again, louder this time, as the diner buzzed with renewed energy. Staff began taking orders with genuine smiles, and customers shared stories of Henry's kindness over free cups of coffee. For the first time in days, Michael felt a flicker of the pride he had once known when he first opened these doors 15 years ago. As the day wound down, Michael pulled Henry aside near the now quiet dish station. There's one more thing, he said, lowering his voice. I've arranged for a plane ticket and a week's stay in Seattle for you to visit your daughter. She doesn't know. Yet I wanted it to be a surprise, and if you decide you'd like to move there permanently, I'll personally ensure the transition is seamless. A man like you deserves to be with family, not stuck in a trailer behind a diner. Henry's eyes shimmered with emotion, his voice rough as he struggled to respond. Mr. Carter, I've spent years thinking I had to carry everything alone. I don't know how to thank you for reminding me there's still good in this world. You already have, Michael said simply, by showing me what kindness really looks like. They shook hands again, a silent understanding passing between them. As Henry returned to chat with customers who were eager to congratulate him, Michael stepped outside for a moment of solitude. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the diner's familiar facade. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would be long, rebuilding trust, implementing changes, ensuring every employee felt valued, but it was a road worth traveling. As we close this chapter of Carter's Diner, let's reflect on what we've witnessed. Michael Carter went undercover expecting to find business problems numbers that didn't add up, inefficiencies to fix. Instead, he uncovered a human story of struggle, betrayal, and resilience. Henry, a man who had lost so much, still gave everything he had to help others, even when mocked and targeted by those around him. Megan and Troy's actions remind us how easy it is to let greed and cruelty poison a community. But Michael's response shows us the power of accountability and compassion to heal those wounds. So what can we learn from this? First, kindness matters often more than we realize. A small act, like Henry covering a meal, can ripple outward, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. Second, leadership isn't just about profits or growth. It's about people. Michael's absence allowed toxicity to fester, but his return proved that change starts at the top. And finally, never underestimate the strength of standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Justice for Henry didn't just punish the guilty. It rebuilt a broken system for everyone. Think about your own life. Are there people like Henry around you, quietly struggling while still giving their all? Are there injustices you've overlooked because they weren't your problem? And if you're in a position of power, are you truly seeing the people who depend on you? Let this story be a reminder to look closer, act with heart, and build community stories where everyone feels valued. Because in the end, it's not the bottom line that defines us, it's the way we treat each other. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like and subscribe, and let's keep spreading the message of kindness and accountability.